Today we are going to talk about the concept of social inclusion and also how social inequalities in our country and social inclusion both are interlinked, particularly in our country. What is this social inclusion and exclusion? From when the concepts of social exclusion and inclusion came into the academic field? We usually start with 1970s. 1970 decade, we come across many changes in not only our country but all over the world. Various economic policies or liberalistic attitudes or different governments following democratic situations and accordingly taking various policies. In other words, globalization has become very important and also a buzzword. In this context, various countries all over the world started thinking about how some people are excluding others, and in that context only we started talking about social exclusion. In fact, the word social exclusion was started by a government official, French government official, namely René Leun. He has used this word social exclusion in order to describe how a group of people exclude others from participating in various activities, decision making, or deprive them from various privileges, benefits, opportunities available for each and every person, at least in theory. When we talk about social exclusion, we will be talking about how a majority group excludes or a minority group dominates, or how a minority group excludes a majority group, or how women are being excluded from decision making process or various opportunities which are available for them, but at the same time they will not be able to use gender based social exclusion. Or we will be talking about deprivation of education, health facilities as well as economic facilities, employment opportunities, whether on the basis of race, caste, class or community. We also come across spatial social segregation, where a group of people are forced to live in a particular area of either a village or an urban area. When we talk about social exclusion, we usually describe it on the basis of its nature. Firstly, we will be talking social exclusion as a systematic expression, where we will be talking about how one group usually excludes another group, will not permit them to participate, will deprive them of various opportunities, will ask them not to mingle with others, or we also refer how structurally a society excludes persons. When we talk social exclusion from the viewpoint of, let us say, a structural aspect, we will be talking about structural inequalities. For instance, in our country, caste is based upon certain structural inequalities. In other words, a person who takes birth in a particular caste, once upon a time at least, was not able to change his occupational status, political, social, civil and cultural status. Social mobility was not at all allowed. If social mobility is not allowed, he is or she is deprived of various opportunities available or should be available in a society. When we talk about social exclusion, we also consider its various dimensions. We usually consider three matrix of social exclusion: caste, gender and class. Not only these three, many a times when we talk about Indian scenario, we talk about social exclusion on the basis of caste, on the basis of gender, on the basis of religion, on the basis of membership in a tribal community, and on the basis of whether a person is suffering with some kind of disability or not. Hence, we can say social exclusion is a multi-dimensional concept. When it is a multi-dimensional concept, there is a need to understand how many major dimensions are there. We usually consider three major dimensions of social exclusion. The first one is economic dimension, the second one is social dimension, third dimension is a cultural one, where one cultural group dominates others and deprives others. Let us have some more points related to how to define social exclusion on the basis of various academicians. When we talk about social exclusion, we usually start with economic aspects. The reason is social exclusion concept was started particularly as a concept related to economic policies. We also will be mentioning political dimension of social exclusion. For instance, Marxists or liberalistic theory of political philosophy, they were talking about how best we can achieve equality. For instance, Marxist political theory talks about socialism, where there will not be any exclusion at all. Similarly, liberalistic theory of political science also talks about how democracy or welfare state brings social inclusion rather than social exclusion. When we discuss another dimension of social exclusion, namely what type of activities we are starting in order to improve the position of excluded groups or individuals, we will be using a word, namely intervention strategies. Here we will be talking about intervention from two directions, from the above and from the below. You might have come across a variety of social movements within your own society. For instance, whether it is Brahma Samaj or Prarthana Samaj or Arya Samaj, these are termed as religious revivalistic movements. Yes? Similarly, we also study Narayana Guru movement, or we also talk about Rana Bhagat movement, a tribal movement, or we also talk about more or less politico-religious cultural movement like Rampa Rebellion against the British regime. All these are nothing but intervention strategies, but these intervention strategies are started by the individuals. Hence, these are termed as intervention strategies from the below. But at the same time, you might have come across a variety of programs. For instance, probably some of you might have participated or experienced details related to Rozgar Yojana or National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. Presently, it is called as Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Scheme. Or some of you probably are well aware of Dwakra groups, where we usually take into consideration of position of women, that too people from rural areas. Or you might have heard something about TRISEM, which is exclusively meant for rural youth and training facilities. Or probably you are also aware of old age pensions, or you are also probably well aware of constitutional provisions where we talk about fundamental rights or directive principles of state policy, or how our Supreme Court as well as High Court is talking about or creating new law on the basis of preamble or basic structure of our constitution, whether it is right to education or right to employment or right to have pollution free environment. In all these cases, we are observing intervention. This type of intervention is known as intervention from the above. The reason is government is taking care of people and taking various measures in order to improve the position of excluded people or excluded individuals. One more dimension also we can say when we talk about social exclusion, whether it is from the viewpoint of an individual or from the viewpoint of a community. Many times probably you might have faced or you might have experienced that you are excluded because you are a member from a particular caste or race or religious group or gender group or a person residing in a particular area, right? In all these cases, you might have felt that how come I am excluded? Why I am not given any opportunity to participate? How I am deprived of all these situations or opportunities? Can't I improve my status? Can't I bring some kind of mobility in my position? Can't I improve my economic, social position? Your answer is yes, right? In such a case, you are deprived. When you are deprived, many a times we will not consider it as social exclusion because only one or two individuals are excluded. But a group, because of certain aspects, is excluded, then it is very, very crucial. When we talk about individual social exclusion, we usually think that one individual will not be considered as an excluded person because social exclusion is always exclusion by one group against another group. But when René Lénard used the word social exclusion in the year 1974, he referred various persons as excluded persons like physically handicapped or mentally handicapped persons or persons having suicidal tendency, drug abusers or persons who participate in asocial activities, disabled people, old and infirm people. All these persons were termed as misfits. Lénard uses this word misfit. Misfit because they are not able to cope with the society. Misfit because they were not accepted by the society. Misfit because they are excluded by the society. But various social scientists opined that even this type of word also is not proper, cannot give the real meaning or proper meaning of the word social exclusion. In this context, we come across how the word social inclusion and exclusion are compared with deprivation, poverty, marginalization and similar concepts. Amartya Sen, Nobel laureate from our country and a very famous economic philosopher, he talks about various forms of social exclusion. For instance, he talks about various dimensions of social exclusion including social, cultural, political, legal and economic dimensions. Under economic dimensions, we will be talking about deprivation of economic opportunities to earn income or poverty or not having permanent income source. Under religious dimensions, we will be talking about deprivation of subscribing one's faith, or we will be talking about political power deprivation or power relations, how a particular political party or political group tries to dominate and oppress other groups and how people never question that. We also talk about how certain laws enacted upon will be useful for a group but at the same time creates some kind of not benefit but loss to another group. Let's take an example. For instance, forest. In our country, many tribal societies are based upon forests because they are also termed as 𝗬𝗏𝗔𝗧 or indigenous people. But certain legislations enacted upon by our government are not able to give any rights to these people, 𝗬𝗏𝗔𝗧 people. For instance, we very recently tried to amend certain forest laws, but still tribal communities are not convinced of it because their original rights over forest products are not yet given importance. They are feeling like that. One more example also we can see. If let us say, if any protected forest area is there and tribal communities will have rights over this forest area. If any illegal mining activities are going on or illegally some persons are trying to collect forest products and all that, where tribal communities are not in a position to stop them, even that also is a kind of exclusion because they are deprived. Because of poor economic position, if children are not able to go to school, then we will say that is deprivation. We also see certain cultural norms or cultural ideas, cultural stereotypes prevent groups of people either to do some activities or not to do certain activities. Let's take a simplest example. Even today in our country, son preference is there, and this son preference is creating many problems to both men and women, we can say, but women are mostly suffered by this. If a woman is forced to go for pregnancy until a son is born, then it may create some kind of health problems to her. If preference is given only man's education but not women's education, then there is deprivation. If preference is given only to upper caste children and their employment opportunities, whereas lower caste, lower class children are not provided any opportunities, then there is deprivation. So, wherever there is deprivation, wherever there is poverty, we usually come across social exclusion. But that does not mean that deprivation and poverty is equal to social exclusion. No. Here, let us see some theoretical aspects also. First and foremost, theoretical opinion which we come across in the literature on social exclusion is, we usually come across a kind of culture of poor people, or learner's word misfit. Many people prefer to be marginalized, they prefer to continue their status, they never do any activity in order to improve their position, whether social or economic or political position. Hence, they are deprived. This is one orientation which we come across in our literature on social exclusion. Another one is where a group deliberately trying to oppress or deprive another group, or in other words, we have a plethora of literature on social inequalities, and that too structurally made inequalities. Here comes various dimensions of social exclusion. We have already mentioned Amartya Sen's ideas about social exclusion. On the basis of Amartya Sen and other writers, let us see some of the dimensions of social exclusion. First dimension is an economic dimension, where we will be discussing about poverty, unemployment, or not availability of economic opportunities in order to improve one's income. Second dimension is a political dimension, where political power is not available for all on an equal basis, or where one particular political group or a powerful group trying to determine what others are expected to do, or depriving others from having decision making or representation. The third dimension of social exclusion is linked with socio-cultural aspects, where different cultural norms or different cultural values, stereotyping this should be done and this should not be done. Accordingly, some groups are deprived of their opportunities. When we talk about these various dimensions of our social exclusion concept, it is high time that we should see what is happening in our own society. Are these dimensions happening in our society? If yes, how? What are the various aspects where people are being deprived? We usually come across, particularly whenever we are preparing for any competitive services examinations, we can expect some questions on how people are excluded in our society. We consider certain areas of exclusion now in our further discussion. We can identify caste, tribe, religion, gender, disability as parameters for social exclusion. Let's start with caste dimension. All of you are well aware, in our country, the form of social stratification is based upon caste. We usually understand various castes and their social position on the basis of purity and pollution. We arrange different castes on a hierarchy where some castes occupy the upper level rungs and some the lower ones. Accordingly, all our day-to-day activities, thinking process, belief system, cultural norms, etc. are based upon or linked with purity pollution concepts, whether it is interdining or whether it is intercaste marriage or intra-caste marriage, or whether it is having interpersonal relationships or having interactions. All these aspects are linked with purity, pollution or hierarchical order of caste. When upper castes try to deprive the lower castes, we have to call it as social exclusion only. It has happened in our society and still it is going on. Let's take a simplest example. For many years, we saw a group under Constitution Article 17, this group is termed as untouchables or untouchability, that word is used as untouchables. They were excluded to have interaction with other castes. They were excluded in some places, some areas during some points of our history, not to enter into public places, not to dine along with other caste people, not to mingle with along other caste people, or sometimes not to enter into a village, and they were also expected to stay outside the village. Peripheral area was allotted for them. It's also a kind of spatial exclusion which they have suffered. Don't we have untouchability now? You know pretty well that still we are having. There are various forms of untouchability even today we come across. The group which are termed as untouchables or Dalits, or we have another word also, scheduled castes. They are the deprived ones, they are the excluded groups in the caste system. Similarly, various castes are excluded socially, educationally, economically and culturally. Now we are using a word to denote all these groups. We call them as socially, educationally, economically backward classes. They are backward. Yes, they are. But why? Because they were not allowed to participate in various developmental activities. they were not allowed to have certain privileges or certain opportunities. They were deprived. They were not allowed to change their traditional caste occupations. They were not allowed to have sometimes even property also. They were forced to render their services in many cases free of cost or for some kind of traditional gifts. All these took about how some people, some groups of people are excluded in our own country, and because of this exclusion, how these communities are not able to develop themselves. Now, because of the intervention strategies, we are taking every care to develop them economically, educationally, culturally, and in various aspects, but still we come across a kind of exclusion there. Let us see another area where we come across exclusion. This area is gender. We have already mentioned about son preference and all that, but even today, whether in our country or all over the world, in most of the countries, we come across gender stereotypes. A woman is supposed to do certain activities, not to do certain other activities. Similarly, man is supposed to do or not to do certain activities. These are known as gender stereotypes. Each and every person from the day of his or her birth onwards are taught or socialized to accept these gender stereotypes, and these stereotypes most of the time are based upon some kind of exclusion. A woman is not supposed to do certain activities. Woman is not supposed to act like. Woman is not supposed to say. For instance, certain feminine qualities we usually mention. You have to be docile, dependent if you are a woman, aggressive and independent if you are a man. These characteristics talk about some kind of stereotypes, and because of this stereotypical behavior, men usually try to deprive women from various aspects of their life. Even today, probably you might have come across where women are not sent to school. Dropout rates is more among the girl children compared to boy children. Not only that, even today we come across in many places child marriages. Girl, particularly 10 or 11 years old girl, is being given in marriage, whereas boys marriage age is more than 13 or 14, sometimes 20. We also come across where 40 or 50 years old person marrying a 13 years or 14 years old girl. We also come across the moment a girl is married, she is expected to stop her education. She is not supposed to go for any educational institutions. This happens even today. Among certain caste communities, women's education is completely banned even today. All these illustrations clearly show that how on the basis of gender we are excluding a group of persons. Why only a group? Nearly half of our country's population are women, and among these half of our country's population, at least 1/3 of them are excluded, deprived, or they are suffering with poverty. Third dimension is on the basis of what type of activities you are doing or what type of economic situation you are in, that is directly linked with education. We come across disparities either on the basis of gender, on the basis of caste, on the basis of class, or on the basis of region also. In some areas we are not having any schools which can provide education beyond primary or upper primary level. We also come across in most of the villages having not many facilities for girls' education. We also come across people who are suffering with poverty, are forced to send their children either for agricultural activities as laborers, or if they are living in urban areas, for non-agricultural activities. All these show how our opportunities, particularly to improve or to enhance our economic aspects, are deprived for some, and not allowed these people to improve their economic position. Religion is another aspect where we come across deprivation. Even today, for instance, if you see the 𝗧 Committee's report, it clearly mentions the position of certain religious communities in our country. The majority of Indians belong to Hinduism. Next comes Islamic faith, next comes Christianity, next comes Buddhist, Jains and other religions, and some people are still following tribal religions. But here most of the Muslims, 𝗧 Committee talks about it, most of the Muslims, because of their economic class position, are not able to improve their economic educational position. So this clearly shows that how various aspects of our life is linked with deprivation. Another aspect which we have to see is tribal communities. Tribal communities and scheduled castes, scheduled tribes and scheduled castes, these are the terms which we usually use, and our constitution provides various privileges, safeguards, protections for these two groups. But at the same time, scheduled tribes are not in a position to participate in our developmental scenario. Most of the scheduled tribes are living in isolation. We, as per 2011 census, come across nearly 10% of our population is scheduled tribe population. Most of these tribes are geographically located in two major areas. One is northeastern area and the second one is central India. For instance, Madhya Pradesh or Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, in these states we come across many tribal communities. It does not mean that in other states tribal communities are not there, they are there, but compared to other states, tribal population is more in central India. Similarly, Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Nagaland or Meghalaya, in these areas we come across many tribal communities. So these are the two areas geographically where tribal communities are situated or located. What about their position? What about their health position, their economic position, their educational status or their social status compared to non-tribal communities? It is very, very low. They are not able to participate. Forget about participating, many times they are unaware of various programs also. Still they are living in forests, still they are living in isolation, still they are not able to come and participate along with non-tribal communities. Not only that, still they are being deprived, they are being oppressed or exploited by the non-tribal communities. Our constitution provides various provisions for them. For instance, if any property is a forest property, the ownership should not be given to any other person other than a tribal person. Clear-cut provision is there under the chapter on fundamental rights. But at the same time, we come across many people trying to encroach upon the forest land and depriving tribal communities from their original indigenous remunerative employment opportunities based upon forest products or based upon some kind of agricultural activities. Because of their technical know-how or backwardness of their technical know-how also, they are not able to have certain opportunities. Their social economic position is very, very low compared to other non-tribal communities. For instance, area wise, a tribal community person may be owning a lot of land, land-man ratio we usually call, but in practice the entire land is not able to give sometimes even 1 square mile to a tribal community person. So this itself shows that how even today we come across exclusion of tribal people in our country. Even today, many tribal societies are not having schools. Many tribal areas are not having any primary health centers or awareness related to health and various other activities. Even today we come across infant mortality rate as well as maternal mortality rate as high in tribal communities. You might have come across some news items published in newspapers where some of the tribal women were used more or less as experimental or control groups for some kind of experiments. Why all this is going on? That is only because of social exclusion with which our tribal communities are suffering. Another aspect of social exclusion in our country which we come across is disability. Even today, in some of the areas of our country, disabled people are not considered on par with other people. Even today, we think that disability is linked with some kind of punishment given to us by God or some kind of supernatural power. Even today, we consider disabled people as victims, and when we consider only as victims, then naturally we are not providing any challenges for them so that they can overcome their disability and participate in developmental activities, improve their position. And how many types of disabilities are there? Many disabilities are there. Very recently, in the year 2016, Right to Persons with Disability Act is enacted. In fact, legislation related to disability, of course, is an old one, but recently certain amendments were made to this enactment. In this, they have included various aspects of disability. Previously, prior to the amendment, some 11 types of disabilities were mentioned, but later that number is increased to 21. Acid attack victims, persons who are suffering with Parkinson's disease, persons who are deaf and dumb, persons who are suffering with autism, persons who are suffering with thalassemia or sickle disease or multiple sclerosis. All these also are termed as disabilities after 2016. But what about their position? Are we allowing them to participate along with us? Are they in a position to take their own decisions? Are they in a position to improve their economic, social position? No, not yet. Still, disability is considered as, if not as punishment from the God, but at least this group is considered as deprived group. They are not yet participating along with all of us, persons who are not having any disability. So, these are various dimensions which we come across in our country related to social exclusion. Let us see another dimension of caste. Scheduled caste we were talking just now. Presently, we are referring them as Dalits. What is happening to them? Even today, they are the sufferers of civil, religious, economic, educational disabilities. If you see various statistics related to economic position, most of the scheduled caste people are still landless agricultural laborers or working in some small industries, and most of them are migrant laborers. So, their economic position or their employment position is still at the lowest level only. Not only that, even today we come across various forms of exclusion on the basis of caste, particularly Dalits. Another dimension which we usually come across while talking about social exclusion is the interrelationship or intermixture of various aspects of deprivation. If we take caste as an example, it is not only on the basis of caste people are excluded. It is linked with politics, it is linked with religion, it is linked with gender. For instance, women are deprived. Just now we talked about it. But Dalit women are more deprived. On two counts she is deprived. As a woman she is excluded, and as a Dalit woman she is mostly excluded. Similarly, let us take example of people who subscribe Islamic faith. They are in some cases deprived as Muslims, But at the same time, because of their economic position, because of their lower social class, socio-economic class, they are deprived more. So doubly they are deprived. Scheduled tribes on the basis of politics or economic position, ownership of the land, on all these counts they are deprived, not one time but quite a good number of times. Here we have to see one aspect. Let us start with a question. What about the social exclusion? Will it happen only at a particular time? Is there any link between a given time, history, cultural values and social exclusion? Our answer will be in affirmative to these questions. It is always linked with cultural norms of a society or a historical point of time or a given situation of a particular society. For instance, when we consider deprivation of a particular group on the basis of race, let us say, until Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery system, slavery was there. White and Negroes, majority, minority, later we started using all these words. Negroes were looked down upon, they were not given any chances at all. But when Abraham Lincoln abolished slavery system and also the deprivation linked with racial characteristics, slowly, of course it took a lot of time, but slowly that type of deprivation we will not come across in societies where racial characteristics provide a basis for social exclusion. Similarly, education. Once upon a time, women were not at all allowed to go for education, mostly oral education. If you take Telangana region, women were supposed to learn some songs which used to provide some kind of oral education, but beyond that, no, they were not sent to any school. Most of the women were illiterate. But presently it is not like that. Many women are going to schools, colleges and they are getting westernized English based education which can be used in order to improve their careers. But are they doing? Or all of them are doing? No. It is not possible for them in some cases. It is not available for them in some cases. And there are so many other reasons also. Here what we say is, in a particular historical time, a particular set of parameters will be considered for social exclusion, and those parameters or those criteria will definitely change when we move towards another era or another historical point of time. Certain cultural norms also give various inputs for social exclusion and also inclusion. Let us take a simplest example. What a person is supposed to do used to be decided on the basis of one's caste position. This was considered as traditional caste occupation by authors who studied villages during 1950 decade. Most of the castes used to have traditional caste occupations, whether those caste occupations are linked with artisan crafts or that is linked with service rendering, or that is linked with agriculture, or that is linked with studying and education, or a variety of activities. But presently in 21st century, most of these caste occupations are no longer there. Deprivation is there, but many times it is not exactly based upon or completely based upon only caste occupation, because we are not coming across 100% caste-based occupations. There are so many changes. Many castes which were termed as service castes or artisan castes became agricultural castes during the period between 1950s to the present day 2017. So like this, the basis for social exclusion varies from one society to another society, one historical period to another historical period, or one group to another group, or one particular situation to another particular situation. Not only that, within a particular historical period, the same parameter, if we take, some of people belonging to that particular category are deprived in some areas, and in some other areas they are not that deprived. Let us take gender as an example. Village women are still not given opportunities to improve their education, whereas urban women are having more opportunities. Career development, if we compare, village women probably are having less opportunities, urban women are having probably more opportunities. Here, though time is same, because of the area where they are, accordingly social exclusion and its depth also is varying. But what to do? How to overcome social exclusion? Are there any provisions for us? Yes, we usually say yes. In this context, we talk about intervention strategies, which we have already mentioned. But when we talk about two types of intervention strategies, that is from the above and the below, we come across two types of activities which occurred and which are being occurred and which are going to occur. For instance, when individuals or non-governmental organizations are questioning why this deprivation, then there may emerge social movements, whether it is new social movements like against environmental pollution, or against the caste-based inequalities, or against the position of a particular class or caste. All these social movements are aimed to question the deprivation, exclusion, and improve the position of people who are deprived or who are excluded. This is one part. And the second one is, government cannot survive if there is a stumbling block for the free continuous movement of democracy. Social exclusion is such a stumbling block and no government can afford it. Hence, each and every government will take a variety of activities, measures. It also enacts upon, it also makes so many policies in order to reduce social exclusion. For instance, 12th 5-year plan in our country has given importance for social exclusion free society. The entire plan period is aimed to bring down social exclusion incidence to 0. So, like this, each and every government will be doing, and these activities, measures always create opportunities for inclusion. We talked about various details related to social exclusion. Let us see in a nutshell what is meant by social exclusion. Let me start with, if you are preparing for any competitive examinations, how to prepare and how to have kind of orientation. We usually follow a method to understand what type of inequalities or deprivation is going on in our society, what are the reasons for that, whether historical or current reasons, what type of activities are started or were started in order to reduce this deprivation or in order to improve the position of deprived people, reduce the inequality, what is happening in our present day society, how either government, individuals or non-governmental organizations or Amity of Nations, for instance United Nations organization also is trying to reduce social exclusion. Like this we have to prepare. When we consider our preparation for social exclusion, we will be talking about the nature of social exclusion, various dimensions of social exclusion, narration or description of social exclusion on the basis of different dimensions, intervention strategies, what are they, how they are working, how much success we could achieve and how much failure we have incurred, how best we can improve them, how community as a community can develop the position of deprived groups as well as deprived people. మనం ఇప్పటిదాకా సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అనే పదాన్ని గురించి విపులంగా మాట్లాడుకున్నాం. మామూలు మాటల్లో చెప్పుకోవాలంటే ఒక సమూహం మరొక సమూహం వారిని అభివృద్ధి కార్యక్రమాల్లో పాలు పంచుకోనివ్వకుండా, తమ పరిస్థితిని పెంచుకోవడానికి కూడా వీలు లేకుండా ఆపేస్తే దాన్ని మనం సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అనే పేరుతో పిలుస్తాం. ఈ సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అనేది స్త్రీ పురుషుల మధ్య ఉండొచ్చు, కులం ఆధారంగా ఏర్పడవచ్చు, జాతి లక్షణాల ఆధారంగా ఏర్పడవచ్చు, మతం, రాజకీయపరమైన అధికారం, వెనుకబడిన వర్గాలు, గిరిజనులు వీళ్ళందరూ కూడా ఎక్స్క్లూషన్కి లోనైన వారే. రెనే లెర్నర్ అనే ఫ్రెంచ్ అధికారి మొట్టమొదటిసారిగా ఈ సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అనే పదాన్ని ఉపయోగించాడు. ఆయన సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అన్న పదాన్ని మిస్ఫిట్ అనే పదంతో సూచించాడు. అంగవైకల్యం గలవారు, మానసిక వైకల్యం గలవారు, డ్రగ్ అబ్యూస్ లేదా మందుల వ్యసనానికి లోనైన వారు, మదిరా వ్యసనానికి లోనైన వారు, సమాజానికి వ్యతిరేకమైన పనులు చేసేవారు, వీళ్ళందరినీ కూడా ఆయన ఎక్స్క్లూడెడ్ పీపుల్ అంటాడు. అమర్త్య సేన్ లాంటి ఆర్థిక తత్వవేత్తలు కూడా సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ గురించి వివరించారు. వీళ్ళందరి అభిప్రాయం ప్రకారం సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అంటే డిప్రైవేషన్ లేదా లేమి, పేదరికం. అయితే మనం పేదవాళ్ళగా ఎందుకున్నాం అన్నదానికి వీళ్ళు చెప్పేది ఏమిటంటే, కొంతమంది అసలు తమ స్థితిని పెంచుకోవడానికి ప్రయత్నమే చేయరు, అట్లాంటప్పుడు వాళ్ళు పేదగా ఉండక ఏం చేస్తారు. మరికొందరు ఏమంటారంటే, పేదరికం అనేది మనపైన ఇంకొకరు బలవంతంగా రుద్దింది, మనం పార్టిసిపేట్ చేయడానికి, పాలు పంచుకోవడానికి మనకు అవకాశాలు లేకుండా వాళ్ళు చేశారు కాబట్టి మనం ఈ రకంగా ఉన్నాము. ఈ రెండు అభిప్రాయాలు కూడా సరైనవి. ఈ రెండు అభిప్రాయాలనే మనం సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అనే పేరిట మనం చదువుతాం. పరీక్షల కోసం మనం ప్రిపేర్ అవుతున్నప్పుడు సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అసలు చారిత్రకంగా ఏ రకంగా వచ్చింది, ఉదాహరణకి మన దేశంలో అయితే కనుక ఏ అంశాల ఆధారంగా మనం ప్రజలని మనతో పాటు సమానంగా ఉండకుండా చూస్తున్నాం లేదా అసమానతలు పెంచుతున్నాం, దాన్ని తగ్గించడానికి మనం ఇంతకుముందు ఏమైనా చేశామా, ఏమైనా ఉద్యమాలు చేశామా, సామాజిక ఉద్యమాలు అని అంటాం వాటిని. ప్రభుత్వం ఇట్లాంటి సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ తగ్గించడానికి ఏ పథకాలని చేపడుతోంది, ఆ పథకాల అమలు ఎంత మేరకు విజయాన్ని సాధించింది, దాంట్లో వైఫల్యాలు ఏవి, ఒకవేళ వైఫల్యం ఉంటే కనుక అసలు ఆ వైఫల్యం ఎందుకు ఏర్పడింది, ఆ వైఫల్యం కలగకుండా ఉండాలంటే మనం ఏం చేయడానికి అవకాశం ఉంది, ఏం చేయాలి, భవిష్యత్తులో మనం ప్రణాళికని ఏ రకంగా తయారు చేయాలి, ఏ రకంగా అమలు పరచాలి, ఈ అంశాలన్నీ కూడా మనం క్షుణ్ణంగా నేర్చుకోవాల్సిన అవసరం ఉంది. మనం సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అన్న పదాన్ని చాలా సందర్భాల్లో సోషల్ ఇన్ఈక్వాలిటీ, సామాజిక అసమానతలకి సమానార్థకంగా వాడతాం. ఉపాంతీకరణ, మార్జినలైజేషన్ అన్న పదాన్ని కూడా సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ని సూచించడానికి వాడతాం. అట్లాగే డిప్రైవేషన్, లేమి అన్న పదాన్ని కూడా దీన్ని సూచించడానికి వాడతాం. జోక్యం చేసుకునే పద్ధతులు అనే పదాన్ని ఉపయోగించి మనం సామాజిక వెలివేయడం లేదా ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ని ఎట్లా తగ్గించవచ్చు అనే అంశాన్ని వివరించుకుంటాం. ఇంటర్వెన్షన్ స్ట్రాటజీస్ లేదా జోక్యం చేసుకునే వ్యూహాలు అని అంటే ఎవరిని వెలివేయకుండా, మన గ్రూపులోకి రానివ్వకుండా బయటనే ఉంచడం అనేది చేయకుండా ఎట్లా చేయొచ్చు. ఇవి రెండు రకాలుగా చేయొచ్చు. ఒకటి, అధికారంలో ఉన్నవారు, ప్రాబల్యం కలవారు చర్యలు తీసుకొని ఇట్లాంటి ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ తగ్గించడం, దాన్ని ఫ్రమ్ ద అబవ్ అని అంటాము ఇంటర్వెన్షన్ స్ట్రాటజీలలో. రెండవది, ప్రజలే తమ స్థితిని ప్రశ్నిస్తూ మేము ఈ స్థితిలో ఎందుకు ఉండాలని ఉద్యమించడం, ఇదొక వ్యూహం. దీన్ని ఫ్రమ్ ద బిలో అనే వ్యూహంగా మనం పిలుస్తాం. సామాజిక ఉద్యమాల్లో చాలా భాగం ఇట్లాంటి ఫ్రమ్ ద బిలో ఉద్యమాలే. అది వెనుకబడిన వర్గాల ఉద్యమం కానివ్వండి, లేకపోతే గిరిజనుల ఉద్యమాలు కానివ్వండి, లేదా వివిధ కొత్త సామాజిక ఉద్యమాలు, ఉపాధి కోసమో లేకపోతే విద్య కోసమో మనం ఏర్పరచుకున్న ఉద్యమాలన్నీ కూడా యూకోకు చెందినవే. నాన్ గవర్నమెంటల్ ఆర్గనైజేషన్, స్వచ్ఛంద సంస్థలు కూడా ఇంటర్వెన్షన్ స్ట్రాటజీస్లో ఫ్రమ్ ద బిలో దానికి సంబంధించిన స్ట్రాటజీని అవలంబిస్తాయి. ప్రజల దగ్గరికి వెళ్ళి వాళ్ళ స్థితిని గురించి వాళ్లకు తెలియచేసి అవగాహన పెంచి వాళ్ళంతటా వాళ్ళే తమ స్థితిని పెంచుకోవడానికి స్వచ్ఛంద సంస్థలు ప్రయత్నం చేస్తాయి. ఇవి కాకుండా ప్రభుత్వాలు చేపట్టే రకరకాల పథకాలన్నీ కూడా పైనుంచి లేదా ఫ్రమ్ ద అబౌవ్ తీసుకునే ఇంటర్వెన్షన్ లేదా జోక్యం చేసుకునే వ్యూహాలు. ప్లానింగ్ కమిషన్ ఏర్పరిచే పంచవర్ష ప్రణాళికలు కానివ్వండి, లేకపోతే రకరకాల చట్టాలు శాసనాలు కానీ, లేదా సుప్రీంకోర్టు హైకోర్టులు ఇచ్చే వివిధ తీర్పులు, వాటి ఫలితంగా దేశ పరిపాలనా వ్యవస్థాపనలో చేపట్టిన సంస్కరణలు కానీ, ఇవన్నీ కూడా ఇంటర్వెన్షన్ స్ట్రాటజీస్లో ఫ్రమ్ ద అబౌవ్ వచ్చిన స్ట్రాటజీస్. ఉదాహరణకి 12వ పంచవర్ష ప్రణాళికని ఏమాత్రం ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ లేని దశగా మనం రూపొందించుకున్నాం. అంటే డిప్రైవేషన్ లేమి కానీ, ఉపాంతీకరణ కానీ, పేదరికం కానీ ఉండకూడదు అనుకున్నాం. అట్లాగే పావర్టీ అలీవియేషన్ ప్రోగ్రామ్స్, పేదరికపు నిర్మూలన కార్యక్రమాల్ని ప్రభుత్వం కేంద్ర రాష్ట్ర స్థాయిల్లో చేపట్టింది. వీటికి సంబంధించినవే జవహర్ రోజ్గార్ యోజన లాంటి పథకాలు లేదా శిక్షణా సంస్థలను ఏర్పాటు చేయడం. అట్లాగే విద్యాపరంగా డిప్రైవేషన్ ఉంది కాబట్టి చాలా పాఠశాలల్ని ఏర్పాటు చేయడం జరిగింది. పాఠశాలలలో వసతులు లేకపోతే కనుక పిల్లలు స్కూల్కి రాకపోతే ఆర్థికంగా మాత్రమే కాదు, విద్యా విషయంగా కూడా వాళ్ళు వెనకబడిపోతారన్న ఉద్దేశంతో ప్రభుత్వం వేర్వేరు రకాల అవకాశాలని పాఠశాలల్లో ఏర్పాటు చేస్తుంది, ఫెసిలిటీస్ని ఏర్పాటు చేస్తుంది. రాత్రి బడిని ఏర్పాటు చేసి వయోజనులకు కూడా విద్య నేర్పించడానికి ప్రయత్నాలు చేస్తుంది. ఇవన్నీ కూడా పైనుంచి జోక్యం చేసుకునే వ్యూహాలు అనే పేట చెప్పబడతాయి. మనం సామాజిక వెలివేయడం లేదా వెలివేత సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ని బహుమితీయంగా అర్థం చేసుకుంటాం. ఈ మల్టిపుల్ డైమెన్షన్స్ ఉంటాం. ఈ డైమెన్షన్స్లో ప్రధానమైనవి ఆర్థికపరమైనవి, పేదరికానికి సంబంధించిన అంశాలు దీంట్లో చేరుతాయి. సామాజిక సాంస్కృతిక పరమైనవి, ఆడవాళ్ళు చదువుకోకూడదు, మగపిల్లవాడిని మాత్రమే కనాలి, లేకపోతే ఆడవాళ్ళ ఆరోగ్యానికి ఎక్కువ ఇంపార్టెన్స్ ఇవ్వాల్సిన అవసరం లేదు, బాల్య వివాహం, ఇవన్నీ సాంస్కృతికపరమైన మితి. రాజకీయపరమైన విధిలో కొంతమంది మాత్రమే అధికారాన్ని చెలాయించి మిగతా వాళ్ళకి ఎవరికి కూడా రాజకీయపరమైన రిప్రజెంటేషన్ లేకుండా ఉంటే, ప్రాతినిధ్యం లేకుండా ఉంటే దాన్ని కూడా మనం డిప్రైవేషన్ లేదా సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అంటాం. ఈ అంశాలన్నీ ఒక్కసారి చారిత్రకంగా, సామాజికంగా, ఆర్థికంగా అర్థం చేసుకుంటే సోషల్ ఎక్స్క్లూజన్ అనే టాపిక్ పైన ఏ ప్రశ్న ఇచ్చినా కూడా మనం దానికి సక్రమమైన సమాధానం రాయగలుగుతాం, విజయాన్ని సాధించగలుగుతాం.